My friends back home told me I was crazy. A couple of them, the ones I'd worked with for 30 years, they pulled me aside and told me I was being a fool. They said, "She's 27, Bob. She's after your 401k. And I get it. I really do. But my rent for a 2-bedroom apartment, a 10-minute tram ride from here, is $750. This world-class beer cost me $2. And the woman across from me, who knows more about Led Zeppelin than Jimmy Page himself, is the best thing that's ever happened to me. Let me tell you how a retired electrician from Buffalo, New York, ended up right here. To understand how I got to that table, you have to understand the life I left behind. Let me take you back about 3 years. I was 62 years old, freshly retired, and living in the same 3-bedroom house in a Buffalo suburb that my wife Mary and I had bought 35 years earlier. For 40 years, I was a union electrician, IBEW. I worked for the same commercial construction company my entire life. I wasn't a desk guy. I was the guy on a half-finished skyscraper in the middle of a February morning, with blueprints in one hand and a box of wire nuts in the other, making sure the whole thing didn't go dark. You do that for 4 decades. You learn to trust what's real, what's solid. You learn to spot a shoddy connection from a mile away. It's a job about making sure the foundation is solid before you build the house. And on paper, my foundation was solid. I'd done everything right. I had a pension that brought in $2,800 a month, every month, like clockwork. My 401k had about $450,000 in it, a number that felt huge and useless at the same time. After I eventually sold the house, I had another $190,000 sitting in the bank. By any measure for a guy from my neighborhood, I was financially secure. I had won the game, but Mary was gone. She'd passed 5 years prior after a long fight with cancer that took most of our savings and all of my spirit. The silence in that 3-bedroom house was a physical thing. It was a house built for a family of 4, and now it was just me echoing around in it. Her reading glasses were still on the nightstand. The garden she loved was overgrown with weeds. I'd walk into the kitchen and expect to see her making coffee, and then this wave would just hit me. After 5 years, it wasn't even a sharp sadness anymore. It was just gray, a low-voltage hum of nothing. My kids, they're good kids, but they have their own lives. One's in Florida with her family, the other is in Arizona with his. We were on good terms, but the phone calls were getting shorter. I'd tell them I fixed a leaky faucet. They'd tell me about the grandkids' soccer practice. What else was there to say? My routine was pathetic. I'd watch TV, meet the same guys for coffee every Tuesday, and watch that $2,800 pension get eaten alive by property taxes and utility bills that seemed to go up every single month. I was just maintaining a life I didn't even enjoy living anymore. I wasn't miserable. I was just fading, becoming invisible, even to myself. My only real escape was music. Always has been. I found this online forum for classic rock history buffs. Mostly just a bunch of guys my age arguing about whether Genesis was better with Peter Gabriel or Phil Collins. It was there, in a private message thread, that I started talking to a user named Aneta_K. She knew more about 70s prog rock than I did, and I'd seen the band, yes, 3 times in their heyday. She was from Prague. She was a graphic designer, and she was 27. I knew. Believe me, I heard the alarm bells. Every instinct I had, honed over a lifetime of practical work, was telling me to be careful. But our conversations, they weren't what you might think. We didn't talk about my money. We talked about album art. We talked about the politics of the 70s, about what it felt like to be young and creative in a city like Prague. For 6 months, almost every day, we had these video calls. She was smart, she was funny, and she listened. Really listened. She was the only person who seemed to see me, the guy I used to be, not just the old widower puttering around an empty house. One night, after a particularly long call where I'd been complaining about the cost of a furnace repair, she just looked at me through the screen. She said, "You talk about being stuck all the time, Bob. When are you going to actually come see Prague?" And just like that, the question was on the table. Was I the sensible, retired electrician from Buffalo? Or was I a fool about to get taken for the ride of his life? For the first time in 5 years, I didn't know the answer. And that was terrifying. And it was the most exciting thing I had ever felt. So there it was. That question just hanging in the air between Buffalo and Prague, sent through thousands of miles of undersea cable. When are you going to actually come see Prague? It wasn't an invitation. It was a challenge. And for a guy whose biggest challenge that week was figuring out why the garbage disposal was humming, it hit me like a ton of bricks. My first thought was the practical one. The electrician's thought. Run a diagnostic. I told myself it wasn't a romantic gesture. It was a fact-finding mission. I was going to go over there for 2 weeks, on my own terms, and check the wiring. See if this whole thing was properly grounded or if it was a short circuit waiting to happen. The entire flight over, I had this knot in my stomach. I was 62 years old, flying halfway across the world to meet a woman 35 years younger than me. I had a picture of her, of course, and we'd video chatted for hundreds of hours, but the mind plays tricks on you. In my head, I was preparing to be catfished. I was picturing some guy in an internet cafe laughing his head off as this old American fool walks into the arrivals hall. I rehearsed my speech. "Oh, you must be Aneta's friend. Well, nice to meet you. I think I'll just check into my hotel." I was ready for the scam, and then I walked out through customs, and there she was. Just her. Exactly like on the screen, but real. Breathing. Smiling. And the smile wasn't for a 401k. It was just for me. In that 1 second, all the doubt, all the fear I'd been carrying for months, it just evaporated. The connection was real. Those 2 weeks, she didn't show me the tourist Prague. She showed me her Prague. And all the while, my brain, the practical part that had been running cost-benefit analyses on copper wiring for 40 years, was running in the background. We'd have dinner, a proper 3-course meal with a couple of good beers each, and the bill would come. $25. For both of us. I bought a monthly public transit pass just to see how it worked. $22. It got me everywhere. Trams, subways, buses. I even got a nasty head cold about a week in. Aneta took me to a local clinic. I saw a doctor, got a prescription for some antibiotics. The copay was so small I thought it was a mistake. It was less than 1/10 of what I would have paid back home, and that's with good insurance. I kept doing the math in my head. My pension, that $2,800 a month that was just enough to keep my head above water in Buffalo. Over here, it wasn't just enough. It was a serious income. It was enough to live well. Really well. The entire 2-week trip, including the gifts I bought for my grandkids, cost me less than $1,500. When I landed back in Buffalo, the change was jarring. It was like I had been living in color for 2 weeks and came back to a black and white movie. The house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a museum to a life that was over. That silence I'd gotten used to wasn't just quiet anymore. It was heavy, suffocating. A week later, I got my property tax bill, then the heating bill for the month. They were just numbers on a piece of paper, but for the first time, they felt like an insult. They were anchors, holding me in a place I no longer wanted to be. My fact-finding mission was over. The diagnostic was complete. The old wiring was faulty, inefficient, and costing me way too much for what it delivered. It was time to rip it all out and start fresh. Making the decision is one thing. Acting on it is another. The first thing I did when I got back to Buffalo was sit down and call my kids. Both of them, on a video call, so they could see my face and know I was serious. I told them my plan. I was selling the house, selling the truck, and moving to Prague to be with Aneta. And the reaction was exactly what you'd expect. It was a tidal wave of concern, and I loved them for it. My daughter, Sarah, she was almost in tears. She said, "Dad, this is your grief talking. You're not thinking straight. You're vulnerable." She's a kid. My son, Mike, was more direct. He asked if I'd lost my mind. He wanted to know how much money I'd already sent her. I let them say their piece. I let them get it all out. And then I just laid out the facts, the same way I would if I was explaining a wiring diagram to a skeptical client. I said, "I haven't sent her a dime. That's not what this is." I pulled out the spreadsheet I'd made. My voice was calm. I said, "Look, my pension is $2,800 a month. Here in Buffalo, after I pay the property tax, the utilities, the insurance, I have about $500 left for everything else. For food, for gas, for a problem with the roof. And that's before the price of everything goes up again next year." Then I showed them the other side of the spreadsheet. In Prague, I said, that same $2,800 lets me rent a beautiful apartment in a great neighborhood, pay all my bills, eat out whenever I want, and still have over $1,000 left over at the end of the month. It's not about emotion. It's just math. They couldn't argue with the numbers. They didn't like it, not one bit, but they couldn't tell me the logic was wrong. I ended the call by telling them I loved them, that I wasn't abandoning them, I was just choosing to live my own life again. And then I started burning the ships. That's what it felt like. One by one, I started setting fire to the anchors that held me in place. I sold my Ford F-150 in a single afternoon. Got a good price for it, too. Then I called an estate sale company. That part was hard. Watching strangers walk through my home of 35 years, putting price tags on Mary's old reading chair, on the dining table where we had every holiday meal. For a minute, it felt like a violation. But then, as the house started to empty, something else happened. It got lighter. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was just quiet. It wasn't my home anymore. It was just a building. Selling the house itself was the easiest part. The market was hot, and it was gone in a week. The day I left, I had 2 large suitcases, my passport, and a one-way ticket. I stood in the empty living room, the same room where my kids took their first steps, and I didn't feel sadness. I felt relief. I had wired the money from the house sale, $190,000, to a check bank account I'd set up with Aneta's help. My 401k, all $450,000 of it, I didn't touch. That was my emergency brake. My plan was to live entirely off my pension. Landing in Prague for the second time was a completely different feeling. It wasn't a vacation. It wasn't a fact-finding mission. I walked out of that customs hall and saw Aneta waiting for me, and I wasn't visiting her city. I was coming home. We spent the first month in a short-term rental while we looked for a place. And we found it in a neighborhood called Vinohrady. It's beautiful, full of parks, little shops, and old buildings with character. Our apartment is on the 4th floor. It has 2 bedrooms, one for us, one for an office and for when my kids eventually visit. It's got high ceilings, big windows that let in all this light, and a modern kitchen. And the rent, $750 a month. My property taxes alone in Buffalo were almost that much. Our utilities, including high-speed internet, run about another $150. We spend maybe $600 a month on groceries and eating out. So, all in, our total cost to live, and live well, is under $1,600. My pension covers all of it, with plenty to spare. My new routine is, well, it's not a routine. Some mornings we walk down the block to a little bakery for fresh bread. I'll spend the afternoon sitting in a cafe, reading a book, trying to learn a few words of Czech. It's a difficult language, and my 62-year-old brain isn't exactly a sponge, but the locals seem to appreciate the effort. Most evenings, Aneta and I just explore. We find a new restaurant, go to a concert, or just walk across the Charles Bridge at night. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. The elephant in the room. This old guy, his pension is paying for everything, and he's with this beautiful young woman. It's the classic sugar daddy story, right? My friends thought so. My kids were terrified of it. And I'll be honest, I was worried about it too. But that's not what this is. It's a partnership. My pension provides our financial foundation. It covers our life, and it means we don't have to worry. But Aneta, she's a talented graphic designer. She works freelance for clients all over Europe. The money she makes, that's our money for the future. We use it to travel. We're saving it to one day buy a small place of our own. I provide the stability. She provides the ambition and the vision for where we're going next. We're a team. Getting my long-term residence permit was a process, of course. There was paperwork, appointments, and a lot of waiting. But I qualified based on being financially self-sufficient. I had to show them my pension statements and my bank account. It was another one of those moments that made everything feel real, solid. I wasn't just some tourist on an extended holiday. I was a resident. I belonged here. 2 years in, my kids have started to come around. They see how happy I am in our video calls. They see the life Aneta and I are building. They see that I'm not just surviving anymore. I'm thriving. Life for that first year felt like a dream. It was the longest and best vacation of my life. Every day was an adventure. Aneta and I were inseparable. We were in that perfect bubble that only new love and a new city can create. I had done it. I had pulled the ripcord on my old life and landed in a paradise made of cobblestone streets and cheap, delicious beer. I had proven everyone wrong. I wasn't a fool. I was a genius. But a vacation eventually ends, even if you've bought a one-way ticket. The real work of building a life, not just visiting one, begins when things stop being easy. My first taste of this came in the form of a manila folder, a long queue, in a government building that smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant. The Czech immigration office. Getting my long-term residence permit wasn't just a piece of the puzzle. It was the entire board. Without it, I was just a tourist on a ticking clock. My 90-day visa-free stay would run out, and I'd be sent packing back to a life I had systematically dismantled. All my confidence, all my spreadsheets and calculations, it all depended on a stamp of approval from a bureaucrat who probably saw a dozen guys like me every single day. Aneta, bless her heart, did all the research. She made a checklist. Proof of accommodation, which we had. Proof of health insurance, which I'd bought. A criminal background check from the FBI, which took 2 months to get. And the big one, proof of financial self-sufficiency. This, I thought, was my ace in the hole. I had my pension statements, translated into Czech by a certified translator for $50. I had my Czech bank account statement, showing the $190,000 from my house sale. On paper, I was the perfect applicant. I wasn't coming here to take a job. I was coming here to spend my American pension. The day of the appointment, I put on my best shirt. I felt like I was going to a job interview. We sat in a waiting room with 50 other people from every corner of the world, each of us clutching our own folder of hopes and documents. When they finally called my number, we went up to a glass window. The woman on the other side didn't smile. She looked at me, then at Aneta, then back at me. I could see the gears turning in her head. Old guy, young woman. I'd seen that look before. She took my folder and started going through the papers. My heart was pounding. This was different from wiring a building. With electricity, if you follow the code, if you make the connections tight, the power flows. It's a law of physics. This was not physics. This was judgment. She held up my bank statement. She tapped the number, the $190,000. She said something in Czech to Aneta. Aneta turned to me, her face a little pale. She wants to know why you have this much money. She wants to know where it came from. I explained it was from the sale of my house. I had the documents to prove it, but they were back at the apartment. They weren't on the checklist. A small bead of sweat trickled down my temple. The official said something else, her tone flat and final. Aneta translated. She says your pension is enough. This other money complicates things. She needs you to write a sworn statement, in Czech, explaining the origin of these funds and declaring that you will not be a burden to the state. A sworn statement, in Czech, a language I could barely use to order a coffee. Right there, at that window, my entire carefully constructed plan felt like it was short-circuiting. For the first time, I felt completely helpless. I was an illiterate child, and Aneta was my only lifeline. She spent the next 20 minutes patiently translating for me as I dictated a statement, which she wrote out by hand. I signed it, feeling like a fool. We submitted the paperwork, and the woman told us we would receive a decision by mail in 60 to 90 days. Those 90 days were the longest 3 months of my life. Every day, I checked the mailbox. Every day, nothing. The confidence I'd felt started to erode. What if they said no? What was plan B? There was no plan B. My house was gone. My truck was gone. My life in Buffalo was a crater. The internal conflict, that voice I thought I had silenced, came roaring back. You are a fool, Bob. A reckless, stupid old fool. I became tense. I was short with Aneta. I started second-guessing everything. Was the apartment too expensive? Should we be eating out so much? The financial security that had been my bedrock now felt like a fantasy that could be revoked at any moment. And the language barrier, which had been a charming novelty, started to feel like a wall. I'd go to the grocery store alone, trying to prove my independence, and stand in an aisle for 10 minutes staring at jars, trying to figure out which one was dill pickles and not sweet gherkins. I'd try to ask a question, butchering the pronunciation, and get a blank stare or a frustrated wave in response. People weren't being unkind. They were just busy. But to me, it felt like a constant reminder of my otherness. I wasn't a resident. I was a guest who had overstayed his welcome and was utterly dependent on his much younger girlfriend to navigate a world he couldn't understand. One evening, we were at a restaurant, a nice little place in our neighborhood. I could tell the waiter was looking at us, sizing us up. He'd speak only to Aneta, even when I was the one trying to ask a question about the menu. When the bill came, he placed it directly in front of me with a little smirk. I saw it, the sugar daddy look. Clear as day, I paid, feeling a hot flash of anger and shame. Walking home, I was quiet. Aneta finally asked what was wrong, and it all just came spilling out. The stress of the permit, the frustration with the language, the look from the waiter. I ended by saying, maybe my friends were right. Maybe I'm just an old man who's paying for a young woman's company. My pension covers everything. You don't even need to work. What kind of partnership is that? Aneta stopped in the middle of the sidewalk and turned to face me. She wasn't angry. She just looked disappointed. She said, Bob, do you really think that's what this is? Do you think I'm with you for $750 a month in rent? She opened her purse and took out her phone. She pulled up her banking app. Look, she said. She showed me her business account. The money she'd earned from her freelance work. It was a significant amount, more than I realized. This, she said, pointing to the screen, this is from the German client. This is for the website I designed for the firm in London. This money is for us, for our future, for the apartment we want to buy one day. Your pension, that's not what you give me. That's what gives us freedom. It lets me take risks. It lets me build my business without being desperate. It lets us live without fear. I'm not your dependent, Bob. I'm your partner. And I thought you knew that. Standing there on that quiet Prague street, it was like the final, faulty wire in my brain had been replaced. All the external static, the bureaucratic delays, the language struggles, the judgment of strangers, it was all just noise. The core connection, the one between me and her, was solid, grounded. The 87th day after our appointment, a thick envelope arrived in the mail. My residence permit was inside. I didn't feel a surge of victory. I just felt quiet relief. The vacation was officially over. My life was here now. And for the first time, I understood that building it wasn't going to be a simple installation. It was a long, complicated job with challenges I couldn't have predicted. But I had a good partner. And for an old electrician, that's all you can really ask for. That letter with my residence permit, that wasn't the end of the story. It was just the end of the beginning. The real turning point, the moment the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place, didn't happen in a government office. It happened a year later, in Florida, of all places. I flew back to the States to visit my daughter, Sarah, and her family. It was the first time I'd seen them in 2 years. I was nervous, more nervous than I was meeting Aneta at the airport, because this wasn't about love. It was about judgment, and it was judgment from people I couldn't just walk away from. The first couple of days were polite. We talked about the grandkids' school. We talked about the weather. We didn't talk about Prague. We didn't talk about Aneta. It was this giant, unspoken thing hanging in the air between us. In their minds, I was still the man who had lost his mind, sold the family home, and run off with a kid. I was a problem to be managed. The third night, after the grandkids were in bed, Sarah and I were sitting out on her patio. It was quiet. She finally looked at me and said, "You seem good, Dad." I just nodded. "I am good." She took a breath. "We were just so worried. Mike and I. We thought you were being taken advantage of, that you were going to lose everything." I didn't get defensive. The old me would have. The old me would have pulled out a spreadsheet. But I just looked at her. I said, "What do you think now?" She was quiet for a long time, staring out at the dark. Then she said, "I don't know what to think. You look younger. I haven't heard you laugh like you did with the kids today since before Mom got sick. You seem happy. I just don't understand it." And that was it. That was the moment. The revelation wasn't for me. It was for her. I reached into my wallet and pulled out a photo. It was a picture Aneta had taken of me a few weeks before. I was standing on the Charles Bridge, the Prague castle lit up behind me, a stupid, happy grin on my face. I handed it to her. "That's me, Sarah," I said. "That's who I am now." She looked at the picture and then back at me. And for the first time, I think she really saw me. Not her grieving father, not a fool, just her dad. Happy. She didn't say anything else. She just handed the photo back and gave me a hug. But it wasn't a hug of pity. It was a hug of acceptance. That was the real permit I'd been waiting for. The final rupture. Not with my family, but with the ghost I used to be. Look, my story isn't for everyone. Maybe Prague isn't your city, and maybe an age gap relationship isn't for you. But if you're sitting there in a quiet house, feeling like your best days are behind you, and you're just waiting for the clock to run out, I'm here to tell you that you can build a new clock. Do the math, be smart, and trust your gut. Your second act can be better than your first. If you want to see more of what life is like for a retired electrician from Buffalo in one of Europe's greatest cities, subscribe to the channel. I'm just getting started, and I've got a lot of beers left to try. So that brings us back to here. Right now, I'm 64 years old. 2 years in. That $190,000 from the house sale, it's still sitting in my check bank account, untouched. We live, and we live well, entirely on my $2,800 a month pension. My $450,000 401k, it's still in the States, still growing, still my emergency brake if everything goes sideways. I haven't had to touch a penny of my savings. Aneta's business is thriving. The life we have isn't a fantasy. It's a sustainable reality built on a spreadsheet that actually worked. And after living through it, I've got 3 real, practical lessons for anyone thinking about making a similar jump. These aren't theories. This is what I learned the hard way. First, your fact-finding mission is the most important part of the entire process. Don't just go for a 1-week vacation to the tourist spots. Go for 2 or 3 weeks. Live like a local. Don't just look at restaurant menus. Go to a grocery store. Buy a monthly transit pass. Go to a hardware store. Find out what a bag of coffee costs, what a bottle of aspirin costs. My 2-week trip where I tracked every single dollar I spent wasn't about being cheap. It was about gathering data. That data was the foundation for everything. It's what gave me the confidence to stand my ground when my own kids thought I was crazy. Run the numbers, then run them again. The math has to work on paper before it can ever work in real life. Second, understand that you are not moving to a cheaper version of America. You're moving to a different country. The moment I was standing in that immigration office, unable to understand a single word, I realized my spreadsheets didn't account for everything. There will be bureaucracy you don't understand. There will be cultural norms you violate without realizing it. Things will not always be efficient or convenient. You will feel stupid. You will feel helpless. And you will be completely dependent on the kindness of strangers or, if you're lucky like me, a partner. If you aren't prepared for that humility, if you expect the world to adapt to you, you will fail. This isn't a vacation. It's a full-time job, at least for the first year. And third, and this is the most important thing, you have to know what you're really buying. When I finally talked to my daughter, and she admitted I seemed happier, younger, that was the real return on investment. The money is just the tool. The cheap beer and the affordable rent, that's not the goal. That's the mechanism that allows you to buy back your life. You're not just moving to a new country. You're moving to a new version of yourself. And if you aren't doing it to find that, then no amount of savings is going to make you happy. The ultimate goal isn't to die with a bigger bank account. It's to live a life that's worth remembering. Look, my story isn't for everyone. Maybe Prague isn't your city, and maybe an age gap relationship isn't for you. But if you're sitting there in a quiet house, feeling like your best days are behind you, and you're just waiting for the clock to run out, I'm here to tell you that you can build a new clock. Do the math, be smart, and trust your gut. Your second act can be better than your first. If you want to see more of what life is like for a retired electrician from Buffalo in one of Europe's greatest cities, subscribe to the channel. I'm just getting started, and I've got a lot of beers left to try.